Hooray. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. This is a fantastic turnout. It is wonderful to see you all here. And hello to all of you who are streaming online, including a special shout out to Gabby's aunt, who's out there in Texas somewhere. I am really honored, I'm truly excited, and I am even a little bit giddy to be hosting Gabrielle Calvocoressi here with us this afternoon. So the structure of today will be, I'll be briefly introducing Gabby. There'll be an interactive talk, which Gabby can talk to all you about. If there's time, we'll be able to do a Q&A. And then we'll also be doing a book signing afterwards. So our friends from Broadside Books are in the back selling copies of Gabby's incredible book, Rocket Fantastic. If you haven't picked that up, I hope do yourself a favor and pick that up. And then there's plenty of Mary Oliver books back there too. And if you don't have a Mary Oliver book, you need to get one. So I was thinking about this. Gabby and I have the same edition of The New and Selected. I've had this book for 30 years. It's important that you all have some Mary Oliver in your life, which Gabby will be talking to us more about. In terms of Gabby's bio, there are some things you should know. They are the author of 3 beautiful collections of poetry. The Last Time I Saw Amelia Earhart, Apocalyptic Swing, which was a finalist for the LA Times Book Prize, and Rocket Fantastic, which was winner of the Audre Lorde Award for Lesbian Poetry. Calvocoressi is the recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, including a Stegner Fellowship and a Rona Jaffe Women's Writer Award, and their work has appeared in many magazines and journals, including the New York Times, Poetry, Kenyon Review, and the New Yorker. We at the Poetry Center are such huge fans of Gabby's most recent poems that we've been seeing out and about, and I will just make a pledge right now that we're going to be having Gabby back here as soon as we can for a full reading when their new book comes out. So no pressure, no rush, take your time, but we are waiting, and we will be the first to swing into action. Although Gabby lives and teaches in North Carolina, they're spending the current academic year in Cambridge as a fellow at the Radcliffe Institute. And as many of you know, there's a firm and fast rule in the world of poetry that states, if Gabrielle Calvocoressi is living within striking distance of you, you are the worst kind of fool if you squander the opportunity and don't find a way to get them to your campus. So together, we started to scheme and make a plan after Gabby suggested that perhaps queerness in the poetry of Mary Oliver might be a good topic to explore with the Smith community. Getting them to campus became a matter of utmost urgency. I'm so looking forward to hearing Gabby's thoughts on Mary Oliver's poetry, but before I turn over the podium, I can't help but mention, by way of brief introduction, one of those new poems that I was just talking about, and it's one that I have found myself returning to over and over again over the last year. Praise House, The New Economy. It works as a kind of list poem ode, with the speaker enumerating things which bring them joy. The rosemary bush, blooming its unabashed blue, the poem begins. Also dumplings filled with steam and soup, not soap. That too. Sorry, Gabby, for botching that. Also dumplings filled with steam and soup, so my mouth fills and I bubble over with laughter. Little things, people kissing on bicycles. One of the things that I love about this piece is that the speaker, like that rosemary bush in the opening line, is similarly unabashed in their cascading effusiveness. As a writer, I keep returning to this poem to learn how Gabby keeps moving its list forward in new and compelling ways. I'm interested in its image making, its orchestration of tone, its unexpected juxtapositions, and the elasticity and syncopation of its syntax. Here are the gorgeous lines, for example, that follow a celebration of drinking a cold beer. How peaches mold into compost in a single day. Orange to gray, to darkness into dirt. Her ankles taste. The skin right under the knob, delicate as a tomatillo's shroud. There is so much here that thrills me, including the way that the sumptuous joys of that peach are simultaneously inextricable from the facts of our own mortality, And then meanwhile, the specter of death arises only to give way immediately to the erotics of the body in lines that have forever changed my sense of tomatillo husks. But if I'm interested in this poem as a writer, I am deeply moved by it as a citizen of this world, compelled to revisit it whenever I need to be reminded of the everyday blessings and grace that surround us. There is both a balm and exuberant cause for praise found in so many things, the poem insists, including bow ties, obviously, in fig perfume and Old Bay spice on shrimp. And what do we find in this list just after an expressed fondness for a dog licking itself in a painting of the crucifixion? These words, "Mary Oliver," the speaker declares. I love her. I really do. I feel really blessed that we have Gabrielle Calvocoressi right here to unpack that one specific, unabashed love of Mary Oliver's work. Please welcome to the podium, Gabby Calvocoressi.
Getting out of here without a hug. Hi, everyone. Wait, hold on. I need to be holding this, I think, for the recording. It's so wonderful to see all of you on this rainy Smith afternoon. Me and Mary, just having you over. Nice to see you. Yeah, I'm so honored to be here. And when, maybe before I even say this, I said this to to some of the audience when they came in. Also, hi everybody online. Where are you? You're over there. Oh, hi. Nice to see everyone. I heard there's people in Europe and people in California told me they're coming. And also, if my Aunt Zaley is here, Smith alum. I can't remember what year Zaley, and maybe you wouldn't want me to say, but so good to see you. I love you. But I said when some people came in earlier, one thing about me, I always tell folks I have a visual disability called nystagmus, so when I'm calling on people, I'm so pleased to have the help of people coming and talking. But 2 weeks ago, against my better judgment, but because of love, all I wanted to do was go see my partner Angeline, I got on a plane super congested and I perforated my eardrum. And so I'm okay, but I cannot really hear out of this side, and I'm really realizing I'm like a little hermit at Harvard. I'm like sitting in my office by myself, thinking that my hearing is getting better, and then you come into an auditorium and you realize, oh, it's not getting better at all. So that's okay, but I am pretty like compromised on this side. So also, if I ask you just to repeat yourself or something like that, it's just because of that. I'm just working with that. As I'm sure, everyone in this room has a body. Wow. Yeah, we're all working with something. So I'm so glad we're here together. It's great to see old friends and people I just adore. The last time I was at Smith College was, I think it was 2010, but people who were there should correct me. I came here to see Mary Oliver read. Were people at that Mary Oliver reading? Yes, what year was that? Yeah, I think it was like 2010. 2010, I think. What I remember was that it was in, I think, the largest theater on campus. How many people does that seat? Yeah.
So,
and how many people does that seat? 2,000. And it was full. And that was for her at times like a small, Mary was someone who could fill a 5,000 seat theater. I remember I had a friend who was very close to her, and he called and said, Mary just filled a 5,000 seat theater in 20 minutes when they sent tickets out. On one hand, who cares? On the other hand, this is Mary Oliver, and a poet who speaks to so many people in so many ways, who we might have always thought of as a profoundly public poet, which is interesting. We're going to talk about privacy, and we're going to talk about intimacy and queerness and all kinds of stuff today. But she is a poet who when I first heard about her, there's so much I didn't know about her. And yet I knew she was somehow like a big poet. And what I want to talk about a little bit today is how within her bigness, which is beautiful and bountiful and contains multitudes, and we'll talk a little bit about Whitman, she's also a poet of extraordinary privacy and a poet of deep intimacy and a poet who, I think for those of us who are interested in thinking about queerness, thinking about people, the ways in which we live on the margin and also in deep collaborative community, she is also a poet for us in many ways. I thought I might also say how this all started. So Matt said to me, am I messing things up if I'm walking back and forth like this? I'm asking the recording people. Matt said to me, Gabby, come to lunch. And I was like, lunch at Smith? That sounds great. And he said, will you talk about something? And I said, I would be really interested in talking about Mary Oliver, and I think I'd be interested in talking about queerness and Mary Oliver, like whatever that ends up meaning, in part because the last time I was here, 2,500 people came to see Mary Oliver, and yet I think of her also as a poet of deep privacy. So could we talk about that? And Matt said, that's great. Be a lunch, about 10 students, 15 students. And I was like, perfect. Because that seemed like a great place to talk about Mary. In that kind of smaller zone. And then Matt said, which was also fantastic, you texted me and you said, could we open it up a little bit? And I said, sure. And I thought we'd like be in a little bit of a bigger classroom. And then my Aunt Zaley, hi Zaley, wrote to me an email and said, I'll be seeing you at your live streamed reading. And I thought, I wonder where I'm reading. Or where I'm talking. And then I saw on Instagram that we were in this wonderful auditorium. I mean, thanks.
Surprise.
No, but I love it.
Yeah.
Because one of the things the reason that we ended up in this beautiful space as opposed to the other beautiful space, I loved this so much, is that Matt said, well, we don't want to turn people away if people want to come and hear about Mary Oliver. I mean, there's the queer practice beginning immediately, right? Like, I don't want to turn people away. Come into the community if you want to come into the community. Mary has brought so many people into poetry, and she's also brought so many of the LGBTQIA community into poetry. So many of us, so many people in so many different ways. Those of us who have felt lonely in one way or another, she brings us in. But I thought it was really interesting because we end up in this bigger space, and I thought that is also interesting because that is something that happens with Mary's work, though, which is, I think so often in those poems of Mary's, there's actually something very intimate, very close happening. I remember being told that Mary used to go into the woods, and she actually talks about it in this. I'm just going to also give shout outs now and then. This book of essays, Upstream, have people read this? A lot of people haven't read this book of hers. These essays are unbelievable by Mary. She's an incredible essayist. She talks about it in here too, but Mary Oliver is someone who used to go into the beech forest in Provincetown. She lived in Provincetown, already thinking about queer space, how that works. She would get down on her hands and knees, and she would just crawl for ages just to see at the level of the fox, right? Like, not just like, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to write about a fox. I've seen a fox. I know what a fox looks like. That's what a lot of us poets do. I'm going to go into that forest. Oh my God, am I going to do it? Yeah, why not? Oh, you're going to hate me for this. This is the first time I've ever done this at a reading. But I'm going to get here. You all look really different from here. Zaley's like, I'm turning this off. I love you, Zaley. She gets down there so she can see at the level of the fox. that's like the act of like curiosity there, and also generosity, and also though, and this is something we don't necessarily always talk about in the work of Mary Oliver, the interest and the desire to enter into the other vessel body. Like, how do I become that thing? How do I, if I dream of the thing, can I become the thing? The scale of that, to me, is lunch scale. Does that make sense? That's like lunchroom scale, small. But the poems end up meaning so much to us, and to so many of us, that they become big in terms of their audience, you know what I mean? And also everybody yell out the one piece of language you remember from a Mary Oliver poem. Doesn't have to be the same thing, but everybody yell it out.
One wild.
Yeah. I think most of the people in this room who know Mary Oliver have like these sort of lines that we're interested in or we know, and they tend to be ones that everybody kind of knows. Oh, my wild and precious life. Which is a really profound statement, and also, and at any point you can tell me you don't understand what I'm talking about, because sometimes I don't understand what I'm talking about. The volume on one's wild and precious life in her poem sometimes gets turned up. It's on t-shirts, like commodified in a way, and we also see this happening with queerness, I think. There's a way in which Mary Oliver can become branded in a certain kind of way. Does that make sense? Like the sort of public world of Mary Oliver. Is there anything wrong with that? I don't know. I don't think so. It brings more people into the room. But the intimacy is sometimes lost there. And so one of the things that I thought was really interesting in the practice of us going from 6 of us in a lunchroom together to this beautiful room we're in together is, how do we think about being in here in the big poetry space with Mary, while also like thinking about what are the kinds of more specific, perhaps smaller, perhaps more dangerous, perhaps lonelier intimacies in that work. And I thought that that was like what we might get into a little bit today. Does that sound enjoyable? Yeah, let's do it. Can we listen to Mary Oliver? Let me get out of the way.
Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things.
I mean, can we listen to it one more time?
Wild geese.
Nothing wrong with that. We'll just do this 10 times, then everyone will go home.
You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things.
Oh, can we go back to the picture? So it was 1992, and I had just gotten into Sarah Lawrence College, which I said I wanted to go to. When my guidance counselor said, "Where do you want to go to college?" I said, I want to go somewhere where there's poetry and a lot of lesbians. And my guidance counselor was like, I think you should apply early to Sarah Lawrence. And I was in all kinds of different spaces with my body then, the way I identified, the way that space was very liberating to me, Sarah Lawrence. My first teacher was Mark Doty. Yeah. Who, when I told him about this, he was like, just don't do the Wild Geese poem. Mark lived not so far away from Mary Oliver in Provincetown. That was also really in the guts of the AIDS crisis. We're still in the guts of the AIDS crisis globally, but in this country in the 90s, it was. And I remember getting this book, and I'd heard about Mary Oliver. I'd heard a number of the poems, right? I had heard Wild Geese from Dreamwork. I had no idea about like who Mary Oliver was as a person. I didn't like understand any of that. I just like, oh, she's a capital P poet. She's a really popular poet. She's really big. And then I got this book, and I turned to this photo. I mean, like, I can't tell you what happened inside me. I mean, holy crap. So can we just, like, take a moment and look at this photo? Because there's something about, like, it's both, like, I'm like, whoa, right? There wasn't, like, I hate it when people say this, but I'm going to say it. There wasn't, like, internet there or then or anything. When I got my first car at 16 years old, I got in my Toyota Tercel. I went straight to the gay and lesbian bookstore. Like, that was my first journey. Because I was just like, they're out there. I'm going to find them. And that was like when I turned this book cover, right? And I wasn't even like fully aware of totally, like my non-binary vessel, my trans vessel, I had been dreaming of this different body for myself, all this stuff. I did not know how to articulate it. I didn't have friends who could articulate it with me. I was writing poems, trigger warning about suicide sometimes in this talk. I was mainly writing poems about my mother having taken her life. I wanted to write poems about this, whatever that was. You know what I mean? Can we just like look at her for a minute? If you want to even write stuff down, you can. Like, it's not a big academic class, but like, let's just spend a minute with her. Can we have a little mic moment? And if people don't want to talk, it's fine. But anyone who wants to say just like what they notice, and there's no wrong answers here. And if people don't want to, you don't have to. But if anyone wants to raise their hand, I'll start. I notice her hand. Why is that for me somehow a point of connection? Like, at this point in time, I was also really like in love with Martina Navratilova. If people don't know, like this lesbian tennis player, I was like, what's there? What's that? There's something about this arm that felt queer to me, that felt outside of something. Also because like I think I could recognize like, oh, it's so tan. She's like, this is a poet who's not in their office all the time. Nothing wrong with poets who are in their office all the time. But like, right, this is like, oh, wow, is she out in the world? Look at that vein. This is not me objectifying Mary Oliver. But like, there is something, right? This is an active person. Anything else, anyone else want to say? Anything else you notice? Any other reading? Doesn't have to. Okay. What? Her furrowed brow. Say something about that if you want to.
Well, I think I like the veins, or like the lines in the forehead they're so beautiful. Hi, sorry. I said the furrowed brow for those online, and just the lines in the forehead, and actually like the obscuring of the eyes, that they kind of disappear behind the glasses.
There's something like, I think that absolutely. The lines in this photo, but also, yeah, the concentration, it's sunny, we're outside, there's something very, I don't know, I hadn't seen an author photo like this. Sometimes some weather-beaten dude, but like, not like this. Handsome. Anybody else? Yes. Molly was, I believe that's true. I'm saying yes because Molly took most of the photographs. But actually, Barbara Savage Cherish, which is, if it wasn't going to be Molly, that's who should take it. That name. But right, Molly, who was Mary's partner of 35 years? 35 years. Extraordinary figure in Mary's life. And my understanding is there's a biography coming out of Mary that I think is going to talk about Molly Malone Cook, that relationship quite a bit. That I found out later, right? I didn't find out later that she was in, until I was in college, that she was in this long-term lesbian partnership. By the time, when I saw this photo, I didn't know yet, like these things, but I felt them. So the furrowed brow, anybody else? Anything else that you read? Yes.
She looks ready.
She looks ready.
She's like sitting down and getting up at the same time.
I love that. She looks ready. She's getting up and getting down at the same time. Yeah. And you know what? That's like so much the poetics, too. I mean, she's in space there, right? She is the animal that she is, as we all, in our greatest liberatory moments, get to be. That's beautiful. Other people, anybody else? I'm very into the glasses. I think I saw those glasses. They were of the period, but it was a very specific kind of vessel that was wearing those glasses if you were embodied as a woman. Right? People remember. We're aging ourselves. But right, there was a kind of, this picture to me is full of all kinds of little coding, right, as well. Like there's codes in here. And it's not something like, I don't think it's like Mary. A friend said to me who knew her, I don't know that she would say like that she was queer or not. This isn't necessarily the point of being like, let's like find out how Mary Oliver is queer. It's talking about queer as a kind of portal of connection, right? That sort of, that economy and collaborative space. So it's not like I think, necessarily she put these things on to indicate this, but maybe. She certainly lived in a space where that, in Provincetown, where that was very much part of the day-to-day, but also just like comfortable in the vestibule, comfortable in what they're wearing, comfortable in that liminal space. Also very into the outfit. It blew me away. I mean, I just, to have this be the person and then to look into these poems that are so much about the animal self, so much about kind of liberation from social mores and having to do certain things, right? This photo, I said to Matt today, when I saw this photo, it changed the way I read all of the poems. Yeah, people are going, yeah, right? A different kind of intimacy came into it for me. Matt said something today where you said, can I call you? I'm not calling you out.
What did I say?
Matt was like, I've seen this photo many times and I've never thought about that. Well, maybe you're not meant to. Just kidding. But But I think there's something to it, right? Like there's something about, we can read lots of things different ways, and there's all kinds of privacies in this photo too, right? All kinds of different ways. And maybe some people don't look at this and see what I saw. Maybe people see, this is an active, handsome woman with a very interesting bracelet on, out in the world. She's getting up and getting down. There's a kind of independence here, right? It's a photo that allows so many different readings, and that I think she is aware of, right? This is not like your regular stock photo on the back of a book of poems. So my reading, and let me just say, nobody has to agree with anything I say today. I'm so happy for us all to be here together having our own lives. But I do think that there's something about the person who wrote Wild Geese put this on the back cover of a book. Like, this is me. The person who was like, you and your wild and precious life. Yeah. Right? Like, that is, to me, something that is extremely interesting, and it really helps me, like, come into my understanding of who she was, who those poems are. What's another lens through which I can read a poem like Wild Geese, which we are getting to, I promise. Can we go to the definition of queer? There's like, this definition actually goes on for one of 3 pages. And we're not gonna go through it, but one of the things I'm really interested in definitions, and one of the things that struck me is that when I went to look up the word queer this time, there were pages and pages and pages of a word that is so like impossible, right? That doesn't, I think, want to be quantified, right, in a dictionary. That doesn't want to be held down, right? It is its own wild thing. Queerness lives outside of structures like definition, right? So I was looking at this and I was like, because one of the things the Smith folks had said is like, which is cool, like I was calling it Mary Oliver, a handsome life. Because Mary Oliver, that's how she describes her life in a quote that I'm gonna read. But then the Smith folks were like, yeah, but you're talking about queerness, so like, would you put queerness in the title? And I was like, okay. But as I started thinking about it, I was like looking at all these definitions of queer and I was like, wow, this is a giant impossible thing. So interesting. What's interesting to me about queer is, can we go to, these are the other words. So the word queer enters the English language in 1513. These are some other words that came up in 1513. Have you ever done the time traveler in Merriam-Webster? Atonement, body, disappoint, distrust, dress up, inborn, misorder, unreconciled, unwed, missprint, inkling, intone, reality, waylaid, whimper, society, unbodied, interesting for those words to come out at the same, legislator, locate, distrust. There's lots of words, but I will say there's a kind of feeling to that year, which is interesting to me, a kind of legislative feeling. Now let's go to handsome. Oh. Handsomer, handsomest, handsome. Ooh, say that out loud, that sounds good. Handsomer, handsomest, handsome. Yeah. Having a pleasing and usually impressive or dignified appearance. Moderately large, marked by skill or cleverness. I think adroit is really interesting. Marked by graciousness or generosity. Handsomely, handsomeness, appropriate, suitable. And can we see the words that come in 1536? Okay, poetess comes out the same year. Also artichoke. Also unlucky, also wishing, and dowager. Also awkward, also undergarment, windpipe, harmonious. I love this, bro. With the meaning that we think of, comes out in 1536. Someone's like, what a bro in 1536. Bumblebee, outrider, scapegoat, decadence, wreath, and woodpecker. I mean, that's an economy I can get behind. But I think that I'm getting at something here. I think there's something very interesting about queerness in relation to the poems, but also thinking about these as handsome poems. A handsome woman, a handsome person. when I saw, and can we get to that? Can we go to that quote that she uses? Her talk about,
This one?
yeah, her life. I thought, oh, yeah, queer, and this. But there is also the summoning world, the admirable energies of the world, better than anger, better than bitterness, and because more interesting, more alleviating. And there is the thing that one does, the needle one plies, the work, and within that work, a chance to take thoughts that are hot and formless, and to place them slowly and with meticulous effort into some shapely, heat-retaining form, even as the gods or nature or the soundless wheels of time have made forms all across the soft, curved universe. That is to say, having chosen to claim my life, I have made for myself, out of work and love, a handsome life. That's very revolutionary to me. It's a really interesting way to talk about making, to talking about poems. And also, I think it's interesting, we know she talks a lot about the softness of things and like the curved things and the belly of things. And that for her, the universe is also that, right? Like that kind of play. But so I thought to myself, could I read Wild Geese through that lens of queerness, yes, but also like through the lens of handsomeness? Like, what if I were to say, like, I'm a queer poet, but I'd also like to be a handsome poet? Will I ever be as handsome as Mary Oliver? I don't know. I want to read Wild Geese together, but can we do one more quote? Because I think this is important. These are both from Upstream. I really say, get that beautiful book of essays. This is her talking about Whitman's desire, Whitman's queerness. She's very interested in Whitman. A great loneliness was Whitman's constant companion, his prod, his necessary other. One sees it everywhere in his personal life, his professional life, his beautifying portrayals of young men, his intense and prolonged references to the body's joy. It is supposed that a writer writes what he knows about and knows well. It is not necessarily so. A writer's subject may just as well, if not more likely, be what a writer longs for and dreams about in an unquenchable dream, in lush detail and harsh honesty. We talk, there's a lot of people who write about Mary Oliver and queerness. There's wonderful essays. There's a great essay on Wild Geese by Brandon Taylor. If you do queer Mary Oliver, all kinds of great things are going to come up. A lot of the essays talk about queerness in relationship to physical desire, sex, eroticism. And I think that's absolutely part of the picture. But one of the things I'm interested in Wild Geese, with both the quote having to do with handsomeness and this, because I think she's very much a Whitmanian poet as well, she's really interested in Whitman, is also this idea of loneliness, which she talks about a lot, right? Loneliness that gets transformed into solitude, that gets transformed into being out into the woods, that gets transformed into like moving into the idea of the animal, which gets transformed into being the animal you want, which transforms into some kind of liberation. Right? That happening again and again. So I thought great loneliness was Whitman's and a handsome life. Then maybe we just take a few seconds and look at Wild Geese. Will you go back to Wild Geese? This poem. Maybe her most famous poem? I don't know. Not always. There's other ones. Could I ask us to do something, and if you don't want to do it, you never have to do anything you don't want to do? But anyone who would like to read this aloud together, can we read it aloud? Was that like a no or a yes? Yes. Okay. And you don't have, here, let me tell you something. We're in Mary Oliver's world. You don't have to follow anybody else's cadence. If you finish in 15 minutes reading aloud, we are waiting for you. It's fine. Okay. But just to yourselves out into the world, Wild Geese, you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about your despair, yours, I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile,
Meanwhile, the sun and clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies, the deep trees, the mountains, the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clear blue air are heading home. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
The idea that the phrase "the family of things" is the thing that slowly echoes off in this room is the most Mary Oliver thing imaginable. Beautiful to read that out loud. Thank you. You're gorgeous. Oh, is everyone online done reading?
Yes.
Says Matt. Yes. This loneliness. People talk a lot about desire in this poem. All readings of this, I think, are interesting and worthwhile. I'm really interested in this. Well, I guess I'm interested first in, and I want to hear what other people are interested in. I do love, like, the intimacy of, even in the biggest room, if I don't feel like she's screaming, like, you don't have to be good. Maybe. But I feel like, what is it to, like, just, like, be sitting and just be like, you do not have to be good. Right? That is some queer shit. Like, I mean, that privacy, that face. I wish we could like put her face up here, that furrowed brow, right? I'm looking at you. I've put this in the new and selected poems. This was in the book Dream Work, where the body becomes animal and animal and animal. You do not have to be good. I have taught in programs that won't allow Mary Oliver to be taught. Oh, she's not really a poet. Oh, it's so that you try writing a poem where you tell someone you do not have to be good in the first line. This is a revolutionary gesture. That's a permission. You do not have to be good. And then, you do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. That's not this, the fox, right? That's this. All my weight is in here. I think we get George Herbert's poem in there, the great poet, all day long, my heart was in my knees, but no hearing, which is talking to God. Herbert's important to her. The physicality of that, like, you do not have to do that. I knew one, like, very well-known poet who was like, I don't need Mary Oliver telling me what to do. I was like, maybe you do. She's not requiring that you listen to her. Like, that I think is also, she is not preaching. People are like, she's so preachy. No, she isn't. She's just looking you in the eye. You know, like when you have a really close friend, and like you have been like the best version of your worst self, and they just like look you in the eye and they're just like, look, that's what she's doing to us right there. You only have to let the soft animal, soft universe, again, soft, 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 of your body love what it loves. I think quite remarkable, and I would say a mode of a different economy in poetry. Queerness, for me, yes, maybe not for you. Maybe for you. But to say the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Like poetically, we might say love who it loves, you know? But loving what it loves is a really complicated thing. You know? What I love is to imagine myself in this other vessel doing this thing in the world that like society won't let me do. What I love is crawling through the forest. Mary used to do this. I put pencils in every single tree so that when I break one pencil tip, I can get another one and write. What I love is being outside of certain economies. Tell me, this is to me, tell me about queerness. To me is also syntax. I mean, there's a difference between tell me about your despair and I will tell you about mine. Tell me about despair. yours. And I will tell you about mine. That's different, right? Like that feels, tell me about your despair and I will tell you about mine. Without those commas, it's still a kind of generosity, but it moves quickly, and that's kind of like, yeah, tell me all about it. And you're like doing your grocery list. Tell me about despair, yours, not anybody else's. Don't tell me about your friends right now. Don't tell me about the world right now. Tell me about you, who I told you don't have to be good. You don't, and this is part of it too, right? You don't have to talk about all the terrible things in the world right now unless they're your despair right now. But if your despair is that you just cannot get out of bed today because the world is impossible to you right now, fine, comma, yours, comma. And I will tell you about mine. The kind of pacing of that is so beautiful. But then, meanwhile, the world goes on. That to me also seems a kind of understanding that those of us, some of us, all of us, many of us, who have suffered and it doesn't stop. Classes still happen. Your homework is still due. What is homework? You have to pay the bills, right? Those things are heartbreaking, they're capitalism, and they're also just true, right? They're true as the river. If they're not going to be true, it's going to be because we're going to burn the fucking place down. Excuse me. Meanwhile, the sun but then this is like the world goes on. I think there's like almost the intimate of like without you or with you, or right? But also there's the pragmatic thing of like the world's going to keep going, and once you enter it, you can always jump back in. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles, she really shifts it, right? The image shifts. Of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees and the mountains and the rivers. Like you can be part of this, but you can also be part of all this. Like this is just happening, right? The soft curve of the universe. You're welcome here. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean is interesting, right? The clean blue air are heading home again. That's a kind of liberation, right? You're so worn down. You're telling me about your despair. Meanwhile, the world is opening. I think this is a gesture that Oliver makes, which is so beautiful. Come, open. Brandon Taylor, in their beautiful essay, says, Mary Oliver, this poem helps them breathe. Are heading home again. Whoever you are. Here we get to that Whitman. And this is also a Whitmanian moment, right? The landscapes, the prairies, the deep trees, the mountains, the rivers. I heard brilliant genius Franny Choi was here and was talking about list poems, right? I'd say this is that Whitmanian listing. Open it, open it, open it, open it. Oh, they're coming home. Wherever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination. This gets to that handsomeness and that queerness, right? In that, we have like this beautiful stew of that loneliness that Oliver talks about, right? But also the handsome life, the made thing. Imagination is something that is there like the river for you, and it's also something you can work into, right? And through that, you can imagine this whole other world. It calls to you like the wild geese. Different geese versus wild geese, right? Calls to you like the geese. Not so good. Calls to you like the wild geese. Harsh and exciting, right? Because geese are not the nicest. I mean, they aren't nice or not nice. They're geese. But like they don't belong to us. And these are wild geese. They are harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. But they're still wild. We don't own them. Just like the queer body cannot be owned. None of our too many bodies have been owned, right? We are what we are working through in this country, what we are working through in this world, having to do with the belief that bodies can be owned, the devastation of that, the toxicity of that, the cancer of that, the horror of that. And so this liberatory gesture where she moves out of the human world and says, these wild geese, these are not domesticated geese, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things, which goes back to love what it loves. Does that make sense? Sometimes I make no sense. I think there's also a response to capitalism here. I think there's also a response to so many different kinds of oppression, so many things we have done through the history of this world, to humans, to animals, to ourselves, to the environment. So my friend who said, don't teach about those geese, that was different. I get it. It's a joke. But I have had very famous poets, I'm going to say, often straight. No big deal. I mean, I'm not judging. But saying, like, oh, wild geese, like there's nothing important in that poem. To me, one of the things Mary Oliver is always aware of and always thinking about is the ability of the body through the imagination and through its relationship to systems of order in the outside world that have nothing to do with capitalism, that have nothing to do with the things that have just destroyed us in so many ways. That we can choose to be part of that family. Just like so many of us, and so many people here, I think even at Smith, right? Like probably the sense of, I've got my chosen family, right? I have various kinds of family. I think in a deeply queer, handsome, beautiful way, when I saw that picture of Mary Oliver, can we go back? Like, I saw a member of my family. You know, like I saw a kind of family here. Can we go to the last two photos? If this kid had known about that kid, wait, hold on, I can't do it because I didn't know how to make slides and Matt had to help me. She's happier to see me than Sylvia Plath was today upstairs. Then maybe, can you show me the last photo? Then maybe this kid, standing upstairs at the Fine Arts Work Center, not far from where Mary Oliver lived, last summer, having had a really difficult health year, bleeding nonstop for months and months and months, totally alienated from my physical vessel. And this was a morning where I had had a panic attack. I was supposed to teach poetry class during the day. I did teach it later. I had a panic attack. I was so scared. I didn't know who I was in that moment. I don't know if any of you have had those moments where you just get so anxious you just don't know who you are anymore. And I just thought to myself, just go down to the harbor. Just go down to the harbor in your caftan with your bathing suit underneath, sort of interestingly masculine bathing suit that you've been trying to figure out how to like have a bathing suit that fits into the body you want. And just get into that cold, cold water. And maybe you're going to be okay. And this is after I got back. I sat out there until my hair dried. I felt really lucky. Can we just go back to Mary's picture? I went in that water. I mean, right there, right in that part. And she lets us all go in the water with her. And I'm so grateful we were all here together. Thanks for sticking around. You all are awesome. We have a little bit of time for Q&A if people want.
I think so.
If people want to ask questions or just want to say things they noticed or stuff like that, I might come forward and listen, but questions, concerns, thoughts? People being like, this is absolutely not it. Or I'm into it. Or just something you want to say about Mary Oliver. Or should I read the Mary Oliver poem that Matt began to read? Can I read you one poem? Yeah. I'll read you one poem. I always wanted to have a poem with Mary Oliver in it. This is for my dear, after and for my dear friend Ross Gay. if I can find it. Yeah. Praise House, the new economy, after and for Ross Gay. The rosemary bush blooming its unabashed blue. Also, dumplings filled with steam and soup, so my mouth fills and I bubble over with laughter. Little things. People kissing on bicycles, being able to walk up the stairs and run back down. Joanna's garden after the long flight to Tel Aviv, not being detained like everyone thought I would. The man with dreadlocks and a perfect green shirt walking home from work, one cold beer before I drink it and get sick. How peaches mold into compost in a single day, orange to gray to darkness into dirt. Her ankles taste, the skin right under the knob, delicate as a tomatillo's shroud. All the animals that talk to me, that I finally let them talk to me, the blessing of waking early enough to watch the fox bathe itself, the suction of a man's hands meeting another's on the street, every person looking up to see them. Bros? Yes. But lovely in the golden light, with brims swung to the back. I want shoulders like they have, want my waist to taper to an ass built like the Davids. I admit it, this body's not enough for me. Still, I love it. I'll be sure blasting out a Nissan Sentra's windows, bow ties, ridiculous blues. My mother's seizures, specifically that I don't have them. That I can answer Ross's call, or not, because we live harmonious and are always talking somehow. Tapestries with their gluttony of deer, fig perfume, and also cypress, boxer briefs, and packing socks and jockey shorts, strap-ons, soft and hard, welcome in her hand and in mine as I greet the real me. The little shop in Provincetown, and the speckled dog that licks itself in that fresco of the crucifixion. Mary Oliver, I love her. I really do. The baseball she gave me that says, "Go Sox," though I love the Orioles. Old Bay on all my shrimp and justice, and cities burning if people need to burn them to get free. My grandmother gardening in the late light, Sun Ra, the first time, Paris, even though I've never been there. Natal plums, tattoos everlasting, clouds, Orion's belt pushing inside her with both hands holding myself up, my weight, her grabbing and saying, "God, fuck," the neighbors, Casablanca, not knowing anything, angels, mashed potatoes, good red wine. If you haven't read Mary Oliver, there's books outside, and I would say get one. You can find so much online of hers as well. Really interesting looking into her relationship with Molly Malone Cook. Really interesting, just like the fullness of her vision. And also, really, type queer Mary Oliver, and you will see there's a whole world of particularly younger poets right now writing into that space. And I think she'd dig it. I do. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.